The next thing I wanted to go over was what happens when the electricity gets to the end of the axon. There's that little gap there called the synapse, and the question is, does the electricity just travel across the synapse? The general answer to that is generally not. Instead, neurotransmitters are released, and so we're going to talk about the stages of how neurotransmitters are created and what they actually do. You might be familiar with some of the neurotransmitters. The book describes a few of them: serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine. There are more than 50 of them. Glutamate. These are some of the neurotransmitters. Step one for a neurotransmitter is it has to be made. So synthesis is step one. How do you synthesize a neurotransmitter? Basically, you get it from your diet mostly. So neurotransmitters are synthesized from the diet. Once they are synthesized, they can kind of get through the blood-brain barrier and then be converted into the neurotransmitter. You could actually eat serotonin if you wanted to, but it wouldn't get through the blood-brain barrier, and thus it would be useless. People could instead drink milk, and milk, when it goes through the brain, it'll get through the blood-brain barrier, and it contains something called tryptophan in it, and that'll be converted into serotonin. So step one is the synthesis of the neurotransmitter. Step two, the neurotransmitter is stored in vesicles. These are little vesicles that the neurotransmitter is stored in. You got a lot of these vesicles all over the place. The picture just shows you a few of them, but they're all over the place, and only a few of these are released at a time. Step three is kind of the important part. Step three is where these neurotransmitters are stored in the vesicles, and in step three, the electricity from the action potential comes down and causes these neurotransmitters to be released into the synapse. And the idea is that is called, what is the name of that? Exocytosis. I got the picture of that for you. Exocytosis, the electricity, you need to have the electricity from the action potential there, and basically the vesicle will release the neurotransmitter into the synapse, and that's a process called exocytosis. And then we have, after the exocytosis occurs, the neurotransmitter is released. The neurotransmitter will bind on the dendrite, the receptor of the dendrite of the next neuron. And on the basis of this binding, some things will happen to the next neuron that might cause it to have another action potential. And there are basically two ways that this could basically occur. Let me kind of give you maybe, hopefully, a good example of this. When the neurotransmitter glutamate is released, so if an action potential comes down and causes the release of glutamate, glutamate will bind and immediately open up an ion channel for calcium. And calcium is Ca++. And calcium, after the glutamate binds, will rush in. And calcium, because it's Ca++, will basically have a very positive effect, a depolarizing effect postsynaptically. Now, instead of saying depolarizing, we actually call it an EPSP, an excitatory postsynaptic potential. And so when glutamate binds, a calcium channel is opened immediately, and from that, the the calcium rushes in, and it'll cause a big EPSP, and that next neuron will probably have an action potential. So that's called an ionotropic mechanism. This is where the channel is opened immediately after the neurotransmitter binds. Notice it's not the neurotransmitter that actually causes it, it's actually the gate opening, allowing all the electricity to come in. In a second mechanism that, boy, the first year I taught this in 1991, I couldn't even say the term, is called metabotropic. And in a metabotropic mechanism, the neurotransmitter binds, but instead of opening the channel immediately, a second messenger is sent out. And the important one in the picture that I have for you, a good one, is called cyclic AMP. And cyclic AMP will then go and open up a channel and cause that channel to be open for a long period of time. So you're probably wondering, what's the difference between these two? Well, an ionotropic mechanism is very quick to start, but also very quick to finish. A metabotropic mechanism takes a longer period of time to start, but tends to last a little bit longer. It's kind of like the idea, I maybe have a little analogy here. Let's say it's too hot in the classroom. You could go and directly complain to the president of the college about the classroom. That may or may not have an effect. It probably won't. It'll be quick, and you might get something to happen, but it might be better instead to send a second messenger, send the teacher of the classroom to talk to administration. That takes longer to occur, but the change in the temperature might be more long-lasting. So you have ionotropic binding and metabotropic binding. And this will cause either an EPSP or an IPSP. An EPSP, when glutamate binds, you get a calcium influx, and that will cause another action potential to occur. An IPSP, when GABA, GABA binds. When GABA binds, it causes a chloride influx. Chloride is Cl negative, and when chloride kind of comes in, it'll cause the neurotransmitter to not have another action potential. Now, if you're thinking, well, why would somebody want that to happen? Well, when you take a product like Xanax for anxiety, your mind is too overstimulated. Xanax actually causes an ionotropic chloride influx, and that'll reduce the action potentials and seems to help with anxiety. So hopefully you understand the idea between an IPSP and an EPSP. I put a little YouTube video in here to kind of explain a little more about it, and hopefully that'll make some sense. The final step here after the neurotransmitter is at work is inactivation. There are basically two ways to inactivate a neurotransmitter. One is an enzyme comes in and destroys the neurotransmitter. It's sitting at the postsynaptic receptor. The main one that often works is something called monoamine oxidase. Monoamine, it's abbreviated in MAO. A monoamine oxidase will basically destroy a whole lot of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine. So that is one way to destroy things. Another way that a neurotransmitter is inactivated is basically by kind of being recycled. It's taken back up presynaptically into the synapse in the presynaptic part, and it's basically stored back in the vesicle to be used for a later situation. So hopefully that makes good sense to you, and you can take some good notes on that. Thanks. Bye-bye.